everyone, and welcome to the channel. For today's video, I wanted to take a look at the Feela gel pens. These are the Super Value Glitter Pack 200, which is 100 glitter gel pens plus 100 glitter refills. These were Happy Mail from one of you to me, and I thought since I had them, I would do just a small video review and do some coloring on camera. I had a request just a little while back to do a mandala out of Jade Summer, and this is the Jade Summer Mandala coloring book, Magical Mandalas. It's 100 unique mandalas from Jade Summer. I can't promise how these pens are going to work on the Jade Summer paper, just in case I really don't like them at all on this paper. Then I'll move over to this Tabitha Barnett Majestic Mandala that I have printed out on some cardstock, because, you know, sometimes pens work a little differently depending on what they're on. I'm going to move that away just for a second so we can take a closer, better look at these. Okay, these come in just a plastic box. This is not like the boxes that I've showed before with the snaps that open. It's not like that at all. I've already swatched these out, and what I did was I just put a piece of cardstock on the back and I taped it down. Each one of these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each one of these sections. And then in your refills, there is 5 bags, and the bags are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There is no numbers on the pens nor the refills, so you would need to keep the pens in the bags. Make sure that your pens or your refills in the bags. Make sure your pens are staying in their proper slots, one of the 5 slots, so you could easily find the refills. So I taped this to the back. And what seemed easiest to me was I numbered rows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I swatched out each row, and they're in order here. So this box just pops open like this, which exposes the pens here, and I'm sure this box will break down over time. So this is probably, I would definitely knock off a star for packaging on these right off the bat. Okay, I particularly like the ones with the snaps that fold out, and it makes it much easier to get to these. But they are at least in individual rows that are numbered. And then you have your refill bag, and on the refill bag, inside of the refill bag is 5. Let me open this. It's 5 individual bags. I haven't opened this all the way up. Let's see. Move these out of the way for a second. And here, well, open, you have 5 individual bags. Okay, and they're numbered. Each bag's numbered 5. This one's 4. 3, 2, 1. And so there's 20 in each one of these, and they correspond to the pens and the rows that they're in. So you kind of got to keep all of this together. So I would definitely take a star off for that right off the bat. That was just my thoughts on that. I think the packaging could be better. But I mean, that doesn't make necessarily for a bad pen. Okay, let's take a look at a pen just so you get an idea. And, you know, I'm just going to have to make sure that the slot stays open so I know where to put it back. So when I go to find the color the next time, it's easy to find. These are the pens. Okay, there's no markings to dictate what colors these are, other, of course, than the color on the pen itself, which is very deceiving most of the time. You open these up. There's no finger padding or anything like that on this particular brand. These are the Feelas. Here's your points. Okay. And that's what the Feelas look like. I would like to see, personally, like to see the finger grip. However, even if I don't get a finger grip, I would definitely want to see something marking what pens go in other than just a bag with a number. I mean, that's going to make it kind of difficult to find. So, at least a 4 out of 5, if not a 3 out of 5 due to that. But let's see how they color and see if that changes my opinion. Now, I did swatch them, like I said, and I'm just interested to see how they perform on an actual coloring book. We're not going to talk about what I experienced with the swatches quite yet. Okay. So, I'm just going to look for a color. Any color. So, how are you guys doing today? I hope you guys are doing well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You kind of have to pull for these, you know, and count a little bit when you're doing them like this. Let's zoom in and we will see what happens. I hope you guys are doing very well. I'm doing good. Many of you had asked, and I'll talk a little bit about that while we do this mandala. Many people had asked in the past, how did Gary and I meet? And I meant to do a cute little Valentine video about that, and it just kind of slipped my mind, and I never got around to it. So we'll talk on that for a bit while I color. Believe it or not, this is actually doing better on the Jade Summer paper than I felt it did in the swatching. Truly. In the swatching, I was not, it felt like it was skipping a little bit and kind of scratchy. Maybe it needs the toothier paper over my cardstock. So maybe these pens are going to work best in toothier paper. But at any rate, yeah, Gary and I. Well, let's see. Do we want to talk about what I remember or what he remembers? And that's funny because on our first, I can only imagine how he felt. Gary is older than I am by 5 years. So when he came to my house, my parents' house, to pick me up on our first date way back when, he realized something. And even when he got my address, it didn't click with him until he actually got to the neighborhood and then got to the house. And then everything kind of fell into place. Gary remembers me in diapers. Yeah, his babysitter was my next door neighbor. Yeah, when I was real little. He remembers the kids who live next door being at my house playing and him being asked to go get them to come home, and seeing me when I was a little bitty thing, running around and everything. So I was actually out of diapers. I was potty trained by the time I was like about a year old or so. So I really wasn't in diapers anymore. But that's the way he likes to tell the story. I can zoom you guys in a little more if you like. Hopefully it won't get blurry. The first time I remember seeing Gary, he was much older and I was much older. I believe I was 14 the next time I saw Gary that I remember. I was at the county fair with my friends, and she was part of the Explorers, which was a group of youth that worked with the fire and police department that just got to kind of do little things, and it taught them about public safety and if they were, you know, wanting to work towards a career in public safety. So she was part of that. Gary helped out with the Explorer program. He was actually, at that time, a volunteer firefighter for the city. And so I was 14. He was 19. He was fresh out of the Marine Corps. He had went in the Marines straight out of high school at 17. He had developed some health problems and had to leave the Marines. And he was fresh out of the Marines, and he was working as a volunteer firefighter for the city. And my friend was in the Explorers. We had went to the county fair where she was actually going to be doing some things with the Explorers that evening. And I just kind of tagged along. She and I were just kind of hanging out, walking around, checking things out before she had to be at her post. And it was kind of interesting. It never clicked with Gary. We walked past him and a couple of his buddies that were standing by a fence leading into the 4-H group, or the 4-H area, where they had animals and things like that to be seen at the fair. It never really clicked with him at the time that I was with my friends, who, of course, was close to my age, how much of an age difference there must have been. I always looked much older than I was. And Gary just kind of decided he was going to be flirtatious. And he was like, you know, hey, you, hey, girl, you know, trying to get my attention. And so I looked at him. Of course, I'm 14. I'm thinking, am I in trouble? Because there's this person, you know, in a uniform, and they're calling for me. And so I was like, you know, yes, sir. And yeah, this one's working pretty nice on this paper too. So I went up to him and we had a conversation. He asked me my name, asked me how I was doing, you know, and at this point I started to kind of feel like he was being flirtatious. And I knew, of course, how old I was, and I knew if this guy is here and he's in a city uniform, yeah, he's probably too old for me. And, you know, I just kind of blew him off a little bit. And Christy and I went on our way, and I think it must have started clicking with him that there may be an age situation going on, because a little later, when we were coming out of the 4-H area, they were still there. And he was like, Donna? And I said, yeah. And he goes, how old are you? You know, he called me over again real quick. And he's like, how old are you? And I said, yeah, I'm 14. And he's like, oh. You know, oh. And he goes, well, and of course, you know, this is just a guy being a guy. And he goes, well, I tell you what, come back and see me in a few years. And, you know, he just kind of smiled. Of course, you know, 14, 19, that could land a poor guy in jail, and he knew that. But I was like, yeah, whatever. You know, whatever. And at the end of that school year, over that summer, I hadn't seen Gary or anything for months, and really wasn't thinking anything about him anymore, just gone. Over the summer, I picked up a part-time job, and I was getting close to 15 at that point, I think. I may have been 15. But while working at that part-time job, one day, Gary came in during his lunch hour, and I was working, and he was like, oh, hey, how's it going? And I was like, oh, yeah, how you been? You know, just a little small talk. At that point, there was really no flirtatious stuff going on. I was having some issues at home at the time, and, you know, I had taken a break while he was there eating, and we just sat and just talked. And it was almost like talking to a big brother figure. He was giving me some advice and some things that were going on. I was having a very, very tough time at that point. Looking back now, it was not all that tough. But at the time, when you're that age, you know, the least little thing is just absolutely life-shattering. So, yeah, that was just life-shattering. At that point, it was life-ending. I thought that, you know, the world was coming to an end. Sky was falling. So he gave me a lot of advice, and he didn't, you know, put me down or anything. And I'm sure he had to have been thinking that it was pretty elementary kind of thoughts, but he didn't, you know, let on if he thought that. And he talked to me about it. And then, of course, I went back to work and he left. And every so often, he would pop in during lunch hours over that summer and just see, you know, check on me and just see how I was doing and everything. And that was actually really nice. And, you know, there wasn't any flirting or anything going on. I'm sure he may have thought, you know, maybe in the future kind of thing, but definitely not then. He knew better. And so, you know, that summer passed by, and I had had, you know, several conversations with him at that point, almost like a big brother kind of thing. We would run into each other around town over time, not very frequently. After that summer, I really didn't see him much anymore. So I went back to school. A lot of time passed by. I'm just counting numbers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. Counting is like the only way to keep up if you're wanting to, you know, swatch these. Well, fast forward over a year, I suppose, and I was in high school, and it was, I believe, homecoming, maybe. Is that in the September time frame? I know for a fact it was September. Early, very early September. Like, first day of September or 2nd. And my birthday is on September 18th. Gary's is on September 9th. And we're 5 years apart. But at any rate, it was a Friday night. It was a football game. I was there with my friends. And again, my friend who was part of the Explorer program. I'm always, you know, hanging out with her. We were tight, best buds. And so I had been hanging out pretty close to where they were all, you know, hanging out and everything. And I was just standing there having a conversation with my friend and wasn't much paying attention to my surroundings. And yeah, this one actually works pretty good here on this paper too. These seem to me, I'll have to try these on cardstock again, but they seem to go down fairly well in these books. But, I was just hanging out, you know, like I said, with my friend. And we were chit-chatting and whatnot. And all of a sudden, I hear someone who kept, like, clearing their throat. And I wasn't thinking anything much about it at first. And then it kept getting louder. You know, the kind of thing. So I'm like, okay. So at this point, I'm 16. And I turn around and I look. So he would have been 21. And I turn around and I look, and there stands Gary. And I was, you know, I just kind of smiled or whatever. And then he did decide to be straight up flirtatious from the get-go. His words were, "And how old are you now?" And, you know, I kind of laughed. I was like 16. You know, I was turning 17 in just a few days. Of course, he was turning 22 in just a few days. But we hung out during the game and chit-chatted and everything. And there was a school dance after the dance that night. And I had planned to go to that. And he had to work that dance also. Like I said, he was volunteer firefighter. So he was there as fire and I think EMS in case there were any injuries or anything like that. So we were just hanging out. I hung out with him at the dance, and we just, you know, talked a lot. And he asked me out on a date, and I said yes. I didn't really have an issue with him being older. I always acted more mature than my age. I got bored really quick with people really close to my own age if they didn't have, you know, a higher maturity level. I've always friended people much older than me, even generally in my adult life. When I was in my early 20s, one of my best friends was 50. So I've just always had that more mature type personality. And so I said yes, and of course I went home, and at that point he had my phone number, and I told my parents. I asked if I could go out with him, and they said that would be okay. You know, I think they had to put some thought into it, you know, of course, because of his age, but I think the conclusion they came up with was that he, you know, apparently he worked for the city, he had to be okay or whatever, I don't know, but they said okay. So Gary and I went out on our first date, which was actually very enjoyable. We went to, I believe it was our first date. He and I have discussed this several times, and we're a little fuzzy on exact specifics, but we're pretty sure, on our dates. But I guess maybe I should have not talked about this when I was actually going to do a coloring sheet. This is making it kind of difficult. I'll just grab this one. Okay, so at any rate, we went on our date, and I believe we saw Pure Country was in theaters. It was the movie with, oh my goodness, George Strait. It was the George Strait movie, you know, with the song I Crossed My Heart. And that kind of become our song. And we dated for a little bit after that. And things did become physical between us. And maybe I was too young to be in that kind of a relationship with someone so much older than me. But it happened. And I became pregnant with my oldest son, Michael. I was 17. And, you know, I thought I was in love. And it turns out I was. So, found that out much, much later. But Gary and I did not work out at that time. He was definitely not mature enough either, truly, to have that serious a relationship. He was scared, and we just kind of fell apart and lost touch. I had Michael, and Gary always paid child support like he was, you know, supposed to. That was never ever an issue. So many people, you know, have so many issues with baby daddies doing what they're supposed to do, and Gary always did the right thing with his child support. So he really didn't have any visitation with Michael when Michael was little. I had moved on into another relationship. He had moved on into another relationship. We had both married. He paid his child support as he was supposed to, but his wife did not care much for me or for Michael, and I never really understood why, but for whatever reason she did not. And my husband did not care for Gary at all, and so it was kind of a situation where everybody was much happier if everybody just kept their distance. Several years passed, and I ended up divorced, and Gary also ended up divorced, but Gary had divorced first and had been single for a little bit of time. He got into another relationship, and they did marry, and this was while I was still married, and he had sent Michael some things for like Christmas once, and it totally upset my husband at the time. That guy's just, that's Brooke and Jordan's dad that I'm speaking of there, and he's a number, but he didn't care for that. He kind of wanted to be the, you know, end all. It starts and stops right here with him. And I'm so far zoomed in on this so you guys can actually see the glitter going down on the paper. I hope that's okay. So as time went on, Daryl and I ended up divorced also, and I probably should have even said his name. It's so bad, guys, I kid you not. If he ever happens upon these videos and hears me say his name like that, he'll try to start some craziness. I'll get emails threatening me with lawsuits. It's, I'm telling you, crazy, okay? But, you know, what if? So, at any rate, we got divorced. And in the process of that divorce, I believe what kind of triggered that situation was the whole divorce thing, truly, was that Gary had reached out and really wanted to be a part of Michael's life. He had realized that how much he had missed and that he wanted to be there, and he had reached out, and I was accepting of that because that's all I really ever wanted, was to him to show that maturity level, that he wanted to be a part of his life. You know, his first wife did not want him to be, and to keep his marriage happy, he had not been, and that had caused some anger in me because, you know, of the whole, I can't believe anyone would choose their spouse over their child, and but he was trying, and I was all about that, and this thing's wanting to stop writing on me. There we go. And so I think that really upset my ex-husband, and that pushed him right out the door. Gary wanted to get Michael the trilogy that had just came out for Lord of the Rings on DVDs for Christmas, and I had said sure, and that was something that Daryl had thought about getting. Daryl got very angry, and I didn't understand why, because it's like I told him, if Gary wanted to spend the money, that's money that we didn't have to spend. Why does it matter who necessarily buys what? It's about a child being taken care of. That didn't sit well with my ex, and it was shortly after that that he ran off with another woman. So I've always kind of thought it had something to do with me letting Gary into Michael's life. But that was the right thing to do by my child, and that was the decision I made. So that's where Gary began a real relationship with Michael. Michael was 12 at the time, 11 maybe. And it was a slow process, but Gary was married to his new wife, who was very supportive of wanting Gary to have a relationship. She seemed as if she was going to be a good stepmother for Michael, and we all seemed to get along okay. So it seemed like a good situation. So we continued on with that for many years after. I eventually did meet someone again, and I remarried, and I ended up moving to South Georgia, to the Savannah area. He was a soldier and was stationed at Fort Stewart. So I had moved there and was living there, which did put some strain on Gary and Michael's relationship, because at that point we were about 220 miles apart then. But it worked out okay on holidays and things. Michael would still come to visit Gary. We had a meet place about halfway that we would meet at sometimes to exchange, for him to, hop vehicles from one to the other. Sometimes Gary would come get him, and I would come back to pick him back up. It always worked out great, and they were able to continue to build the relationship that they should have been able to have had from the very beginning. And that meant a lot to me for them to be able to do that. Okay, I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah. So, we continued to work together for that benefit of Michael over the years that I lived there. We talked frequently to make sure we were always on the same page of music, because we were dealing, of course, with a teenage boy by that point. And teenage boys can get into all kinds of mischief. So, yeah. And it was always still easy to talk to Gary. And there was never, I don't recall ever having any lovey-dovey kind of feelings for him. Just, I didn't have hatred or anything. I understood that even though he was 22, he was young. I was definitely young. And we both had a lot of growing up to do. And I was okay with that. But when we would talk, it was easy to talk to him. It was enjoyable to talk to him. And he said he always felt the same way. But, neither of us, I don't think, ever really felt the lovey-dovey kind of thing going on between us at that point. And that was fine. It was probably best. We were both married, trying to have a life with our spouses. And so over time, things were going on in my life, things were going on in his life. Marriages were beginning to crumble. Neither of us knew. We didn't talk about that personal kind of stuff together, but he and his wife did split, and he was on his own and single, and I had actually encouraged him to try to work things out, that marriages were worth fighting for. He was pretty determined. He was done with the marriage game. Of course, at that point, my marriage was falling apart. I was trying to fight for it, but I had pretty much come to the conclusion, if and when I walked away from that situation, I was done. Never looking back, never wanted another relationship, much better off single. And, but, I've always felt that marriages are worth fighting for, and that's why my relationships, as big of failures as some of them have been, have lasted much longer, way past their expiration date. And, yeah, it was just from fighting. Daryl and I were married for 10 years. Once he was busted in his affair, I still tried to fix things. I'm glad that they were not fixable, because I know now that I would have never gotten over that or forgave him. Infidelity had taken place in my new marriage, and I was not forgiving that, and that was the biggest part of the problem. There was no trust. There was no real intimacy anymore, and everything was just falling to pieces. So Gary was, you know, I had gotten pretty sick. I was having some pretty bad kidney stone issues, and, you know, Gary would text me every so often just to check on me, see how I was doing, which was, you know, real sweet and nice, but it was never anything more than, you know, a friendship kind of thing. And finally, I'd had enough of the situation I was in. And so much had happened, so much water had went over that bridge. It was no longer fixable. All I wanted to do was come home. Home being here where I am, just south of Atlanta in Henry County. I wanted to leave Liberty County and get back home. That's all I really cared about at that point. That's where my parents were. That's where I grew up. That's where I wanted to be. And I packed up a U-Haul one morning, and we came home. And when I tell you, it wasn't even a huge U-Haul. I didn't take anything other than essentials. I just wanted out so badly that I just took my children's things. Most of their things did go. I took one TV. I took my clothes. Anything that was like really, really personal, I took. But as far as all the furniture, I left it. I walked out of there, left it all behind, started all over from scratch. The one thing that apparently my now ex-husband was quoted as saying after I had left was, "Oh my God, I can't believe she took the trash can." For whatever reason, I knew that I would need a trash can, and I took it. I left big ticket items, but dang, I took that trash can. And that was what he was quoted as saying, was, you know, "Oh my God, she took the trash can." But, you know, I just wanted out. I just wanted it to be done. It was what I felt was best for me. It's what I felt was best for my children. So I came home, and when I got here, I had no heat. The gas had a leak, so the heat had to be turned off. It was 19 degrees outside. It seemed like anything that could go wrong was going to go wrong. The only person I had asked several people about firewood, about, you know, some type of a heating situation, I had finally said, "Oh my gosh, I'm just going to call Gary." And I did, and he was kind enough to bring a kerosene heater. You know, at that point, you never want to admit to your exes that a relationship has failed. I mean, that's really hard to, I think, to admit to an ex. So, of course, Gary said later that he expected that to happen. He had feelings that that's what was going on, and that things were coming to an end on my relationship, but he never questioned it or asked about it. But I think it's hard to admit those kinds of things. But he brought us a heater. He got us heat, which was wonderful. And then immediately my hot water heater went out, and we had no hot water. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. And at this point, by this time, he was already working for the county. And he actually, his station that he worked at was about a mile from the house I was living at. So every third day, he was less than a mile away for 24 hours. And he was coming over. He helped us fix the water heater, which was wonderful. The insulation I was living in a mobile home, and the insulation was falling out from underneath. He and I fixed that insulation. And still, we weren't, you know, I wasn't tracking anything or whatever, and I don't really think he was either. But of course, by that point, we had talked about a lot more personal things that had went on with us in our lives. and that we had been through over the years. And we were talking on a fairly regular basis, you know, just as friends. And just one afternoon after we had worked on the insulation and things, we were standing on my front porch and we were just chit-chatting, and I was feeling kind of weird about the situation. I mean, it wasn't a bad weird. It was just awkward. I wasn't sure what this feeling was that I was having. I was starting to question my own sanity about this, because it just felt so natural and so right. And so, I mean, I don't know. It was just strange. And so we just kind of stood there and looked at each other and talked. And that was the first time I had really, I think, truly looked at him in, gosh, probably since I was a teenager. He ended up sending me a text later. He went back to the station, and, you know, as childish as this may sound, he sent me a text later, and he said, "I've got a confession." And I was like, okay. And he said, "Standing there on the porch, I wanted nothing more than to kiss you." And I was like, oh my. And the more I thought about it, you know, I think he was probably scared at that point and thinking, oh my God, I really blew this, because I got pretty quiet. I was trying to process, you know, what all we had just talked about, what all had just transpired and happened, because it was strange. It was very strange. But while I was sitting there and thinking on this and processing all this through, what I realized is that weird feeling I was having was feelings. I guess unresolved feelings for him. And I guess it was the wall that I had put up all those years, because, you know, of course he hurt me when I was young. Of course he did. It broke my heart. I realized that's what I was feeling, that I was kind of experiencing the same type of feelings he was experiencing. So, you know, I just decided, well, why not be a little flirtatious? And I was like, well, you know, why didn't you? You never know what'll happen till you try. So his whole thing was, you ready for this? His whole thing was just to come over as soon as he could after that and just lay one on me just to see what would happen. And we started seeing each other right then, and we've been together ever since. So I've really known Gary since I was a small child, and, or at least known of him, and through my teenage years and through my life as being the father of my oldest child. And of course, we both had marriages and failed marriages. And he, you know, we had children. He has a daughter, Jessica, who is younger than Michael, of course, but from his first marriage. And I had Brooke and Jordan from my second marriage. And we had Michael together. So here we are now and married, and it's kind of confuses people sometimes with the dynamics, especially before Brooke passed away. And oh, she loved Gary so much. I wish she could have. She passed before Gary and I got super duper serious and married. Of course, part of me believes that had Brooke not loved him so much and had not passed, that I may not have married Gary. Her passing brought Gary and I even closer together. There's no way I could have survived that without his support and love that he showed me through that very, very, very difficult time. And so I really think that she brought us even closer. And I'm sure we would have gotten closer, but it would have took a lot more time. But you know, when people see the dynamics, because, you know, in the beginning, when we were dating, you would have Michael, who was the oldest of all these kids, and calling, you know, me mom and Gary dad. And then you would have Jessica, who did not refer to me as mom, but was younger than Michael, and Gary was dad. And then you would have Jordan and Brooke, who was younger than even Jessica, who I was mom, and Gary was, well, Gare Bear is what they were calling him, as a little pet name. And so, you know, people would always kind of like eyebrow up with those whole dynamics. And then once they heard the story, it was kind of a, oh, that's so sickening, you know, that's like some sick Hallmark Christmas movie, you know. And it kind of was. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful mess. And, you know, I'm glad that I fell into that mess. I don't regret it, not one bit in the world. And so Michael, at 22, I believe, had his parents together as a married couple for the first time, or even dating for the first time in his life, when he was like 21 and 22, was when his parents were finally together as a couple in his lifetime. So it was a huge adjustment, you know, for him especially. And but, you know, it's all worked out really well. We actually talked to Michael and Jessica before we got serious, because we, you know, both wanted to make sure that those two were okay with the situation. Jessica was like, I don't care, y'all are grown, do, you know, do your thing, do whatever. Michael, actually, the sweet thing, he warned the two of us that he was very concerned about us being together as a couple, that he did not necessarily believe that we had compatible personalities. He was afraid that he, you know, that we would completely just fall apart and not do well, you know, together as a couple. So that was a big, you know, concern of his. And I mean, I understand. You know, I believe in Michael's mind, he was okay with Gary and I never having been together. That was the only life he had ever known. And then here we were presenting this whole new dynamic. And I think it scared him, because it took all those years to get a relationship with his dad, and it had become a good relationship. And Michael and I have always been extremely, extremely close. And I think Michael was so afraid that if things went south, it would ruin his relationship that he had built with his father, and that terrified him. He also said, however, you know, I'm not going to tell you guys not to do this, just accept my warning. And so we did. And here we are. We were married in November of 2000. Okay. I'm having some problems. Okay, I was having some problems with my phone. I hope I fixed it. I was gone for just a little while, but I think I got it fixed. So let's continue on. Hopefully there'll be no lost footage when I put all this together. But yeah, so we were married in 2015, November 1st. We always like to joke around because the paperwork didn't actually get filed until December, I believe the 28th. So Gary's always joking, saying that our anniversary is not till December 28th. And I'm like, no, buddy. There were witnesses that were at that wedding on November 1st. He doesn't like the November 1st date because it's right at the peak of hunting season. And I always make him, you know, kind of hang around, at least just for that day. But it's all good. It's all good. So that is the story of Gary and I. You can tell me how sappy you think it is. How did you meet your significant other? Where did you guys meet? Is there any kind of cute little story to go along with it? You know, let me know. But, you know, I just think that Gary, our story just goes to prove, in my opinion, that if two people are meant, you know, to be together, it does not matter how many miles or how much time comes between you, that life has a way of bringing you back together. It's, you know, almost like it's just an attraction. It's just something that will always kind of bring you back. And that's definitely what happened in our story. And I'm so glad it did. We get along pretty well with each other, and we really always have. When one of us is offended or hurt, we're very quick to tell the other person. We don't harbor feelings that can later turn into resentments. We immediately inform the other person when there's something going on that we're not okay with or that's really bothering us. And that works well for us. We both have very dominant type personalities, which in some relationships can be devastating to a relationship. But it works for us because neither one of us are willing to take crap. You know, we've been through so much, and we've seen so much, and we've experienced so much, felt so much, and we're just not going to take any crap. So if I start to dish crap, he is real quick to call me out on it right then and there, and vice versa. If he starts to, you know, dish it, I'm real quick to call it on him right there. And it's just, we just tell each other, you know, no, that's not going to happen. It's not going to go down like this. And we generally are able to resolve things very quickly that way. And so that works really well for us. And yeah, so maybe this time we've gotten it right. Both of us had sworn off relationships. It wasn't even until after Brooke passed away that we entertained the idea of marriage to each other. As a matter of fact, we made it very clear going in that we were going to have a good time. We were going to enjoy each other's company. But that was going to be about the extent of what would transpire with us. And that was just not the case. So, let's see. I'm just laying down different colors here so you guys can see this. This video is actually getting a little long. But I did want to share that story with you guys and be able to show you the Feelas. And I wanted to do the requested video for the Jade Summer Mandala book with my gel pens was the request. The Mandala book with my gel pens. So this seemed like the perfect opportunity to, you know, accomplish a lot of things. I got to show you guys the Feelas, and they do seem to lay down very good on this Jade Summer paper, which is the Amazon paper. I've only had one pen that kind of wanted to act up on me. So, and you know, once I did the tap, 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 it immediately cleared up and started back working. So I don't think that I'll hang around and do all of these on camera, because that would probably put us here for a very, very, very long time. I don't mind to be here for a little while, but let's see. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time choosing colors. I'm really not paying attention so much to whether or not they match. Kind of just trying to put some color down. So what do you guys think of these? They're very reasonably priced for the 100 set. It's like I said, the problem I have with it is the packaging. I think it leaves a lot to be desired, and I think that there needs to be labels for sure on there definitely needs to be some labels on the pens, so you'll know which pen you're grabbing for and all of that. But they seem to be performing well, and they are at a good price point. So if you were to swatch them the way I did in their box, I think the box would hold up long enough to get the use out of the gel pens. I really do. So as far as being a budget option, I think they are. I don't think I would overlook them. I would definitely take off a star in a review due to packaging and labeling. But it's not, there's not many gel pens out there that are labeled. So you kind of have to find a way, to swatch out a lot of the different gel pen brands. Color It is just on it with having not only a name but a number on their gel pens. And the refills are clearly marked, but there's only 96 total colors. Only 48 of those are glitter. So, you kind of gotta weigh that out if that's something you would be okay with. I personally like having lots of color options, and that's because I use my gel pens to color in so many of my different books, my double-sided books especially. So to me, it's important to have many, many different colors to choose from. If you only use them to embellish a little here and there, then you can be a lot more picky about which pens you're getting, because you don't need to be so, you don't need to have all of the colors that I like to have at my disposal. And that's why I like to try so many different brands. to see which ones, you know, are going to work out best for what I like to do with my books. Okay. I'm just kind of grabbing, trying to look at this and see which one I want to snatch up to try something with next. Like I said, I don't know. I'm not going to stay too much longer on this. It would take probably a couple hours for me to completely finish this mandala. But these pens do seem to work pretty well on this paper. I'm getting good coverage. So I'm thinking it may have just been a swatching issue, and I was also kind of swatching at an odd angle because I actually put the paper on the box and taped it down before I did the swatches. So that could have also played a part, and that's why I think it is so important. Just because you swatch something and love it, you need to color with it, because that doesn't mean you're going to love it when you color with it, and vice versa. You know, there's been things that I've swatched, and I'm like, don't like that. I really didn't think I was going to like these Feelas, to be honest. I was kind of iffy about it when I was doing those swatches. But I thought, okay, I'm going to do the video. There's only one way to do it. You know, you just got to, ain't none to it but to do it. I love to say that. And so I did, and I like them a lot better. And the same thing happened with the Arteza fine liners. Once I actually sat down and colored with them, I found that if, you know, in my opinion, if you like the Staedtlers, you're probably going to like the Feelas. So, or not Feelas, excuse me. Haha, not Feelas, Artezas. And these do work pretty nice. I would definitely like to see names placed on them, or at least a number. But this will work. I have no idea how crazy of a colors I'm grabbing at this point, so. I hope this has shown a pretty decent range of color for you guys, and you've kind of been able to be zoomed in pretty closely to see how the color has laid down, so you can get an idea as to whether or not you might like to try the Feelas. I'm actually starting to get a bit of a headache. definitely going to have to do something about that. You guys hear Bradley scratch the door. When I took the break earlier, when my camera was acting up, I'd stepped outside just trying to figure out what was going on with that, and he wandered outside with me, and of course he's came back in the doggy door now, but the room to my door here, or the door to my room, the door to my room is closed, so he can't get back in here with me. Right now I'm home alone, so there's nobody else in the house, so he's kind of tweaking out that he's all alone. The poor baby. Let me finish this last little bit up right here, and I may go ahead and stop this video, but I'll give you guys another look at the swatches. No, he's not giving up. Now it's kind of a mommy, please kind of scratch. But mama. Okay, let me zoom this out for you guys. Alright, so here's what I did so far on this. It's turning out very pretty, actually. And again, this was the 100 count Feela with 100 refills, and the book is 100 Magical Mandalas by Jade Summer. I will leave a link in the description to the Feelas as well as to this book, just in case anyone's interested. Thank you so much for going through my links. My Amazon affiliate link is always down below also. It helps so much just to click on my links, and even if you don't purchase right away. So here are the swatches again of the Feela 100 glitters. It shows you what you get. Like I said, I just put the paper here, taped it down, numbered the rows. You do have the numbers on these. You have your refills in bags with the numbers. So, I mean, it makes it possible to swatch, and which is important to me. I swatch out pretty much all of my supplies. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed my story of how Gary and I met and how we ended up together now. And so I'm going to close this out, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, peace, love, and happy coloring. Bye, guys.